I've always been like a music nerd, and I feel like music was the way that ended up like communicating with me. And I ended up getting into like Christianity then, and then I think it was like a very like the like evangelical stereotype Christianity, and then I had to sort of work through that and be like, oh, why doesn't this click with me? And I'm like, I had to start figuring out like, oh, here's the kind of believer that I am.
Hello and welcome to Here in LA, Echo Park Edition. Today we chat with Mike Rowe. Mike is a writer, an editor, a screenwriter, a husband, a native Californian, and sadly, one of the many who were axed at KPCC earlier this year. Fret not, though. He was quickly picked up by the rap, who know talent when they see it. So we'll talk about working at the Pasadena NPR station, where we met, how he got the gig some 15 years ago, and about the book he wrote about 30 Rock. And of course, we'll talk about living in Echo Park. So here he is, Mike Rowe. Hello, everybody. I am here with Mike Rowe.
Yeah,
Yay! Mike, so great to have you here. Thank you for being on the show.
A pleasure, Tony. A pleasure as always. We're old pals working in journalism together.
Over at KPCC.
That's right. It was my first, that's what brought me down to Los Angeles in the first place.
It was?
It was. I was living up in Seattle. I was interning for a big public television station. And, I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I knew I wanted to work in media. And I applied, and I ended up getting a gig. It was they called me back because one of the hiring managers there had gone to like a conference and knew my boss like from my internship, and I was able to get a call back, and they had said, when can you be down here? And I was like, how about next week? And they were like, okay, sounds good. And
what year are we talking?
This was like 2007.
2007. So when people say, why would you intern anywhere? All you're going to do is empty ashtrays, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself. Or pour coffee for people.
Yeah.
Why would you do this? This is why.
Exactly. I mean, I think that it's one of those best examples of like, knowing people and connecting with people is like how most people get jobs. And it's a bummer that we don't have a way that's more systematized or whatever. But it was like such a, lucky break for me. Like, I think, before that, like I had only ever temped before. I had like done some temp work. I had some internships. I worked on this indie movie up in Seattle for no money. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing that really inspired me to like apply myself, just because I had so much fun working on this indie film where it was like working really hard, long hours, doing something you care about. And I was like, I gotta give it a go and try and find something, man.
So what was the gig at KPCC that you got hired for?
I got hired to be a digital production assistant back when like their website like literally updated like once a day or something like that. And so they were like trying to expand their digital footprints, and it was like hired as a more technical role. And I was I sort of thought like, well, I'm gonna get into I didn't see myself as a journalist necessarily at that time. And I think that, it was sort of like the digital side and you had the journalism side.
Right. So you thought you'd be like an engineer or something?
I mean, it was like basically like doing the HTML and like updating the website and like editing stuff like radio scripts for the website. Yeah. But like it wasn't like original stuff yet.
Right. Okay, so that's 2007.
Yeah.
When did you actually start writing for KPCC?
I think that it was for the 2008 election, I got to start writing an election blog talking about, and like I did like a quiz talking about like, here's the latest news. Because I was a big politics nerd. Like before I got into journalism, I did a lot of political volunteer work, and I thought that's where that's where I was sort of interested in going. But
You helped Obama get elected?
I may have helped Obama get elected.
God bless you, Mike Rowe.
Before starting with KPCC, and then like as I started to realize like, oh, this is becoming more journalism-y. That's when I stepped away from doing a political stuff because I've always been like very uptight and playing by the rules, and I'm like, I'm not even like officially have to do this, but I want to step away and make sure I'm like journalistic objectivity and everything.
Yeah. Do you remember your first time that you were on the air at KPCC?
I don't remember the first time, but I remember like the election night 2008 was one of my first big memories from there because, it was everybody working in the studio at Pasadena City College at the time.
Oh, you guys were over there then?
Yeah, I worked mostly we had downtown offices, and then the radio part of it was in Pasadena. So like, it was very much like split between like the reporters and the like tech people were all downtown, and then the like engineers and when people were on the air was in Pasadena. But like, so it was definitely like a weird, there were people like I never knew, I never saw because like they were off in like a basement in the Pasadena City College before we built like the new headquarters in 2010, I think.
So you saw KPCC transition from City College over to Pasadena. So you saw that Raymond Avenue building?
Yeah, being built. I remember walking through the construction site as it was coming together.
What was it built up from ground up?
No, it was like some old warehouse or something, and they were like restoring, but like they were ripped out the guts of the thing and basically rebuilt it from like mostly scratch. There's a couple remnants of like what was there before, like there was like that's still there, but it's mostly was sort of all new insides.
That's surprising to me because, I mean, not completely surprising because there are some old buildings on that street, but it just looks like such a beautiful modern space that is perfect for what they do there.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember
except for the parking, of course.
Exactly. When they first were building it, I remember they had like these grand plans for what it was going to be, and they had like I remember as it was going on, they were like, well, we have to scale back this, and we have to like they were going to have like a much bigger sort of like space for entertaining people, like on the roof or something, and like that got they're like this cool design, like if they had these little paperweights of what the building was going to look like, and they don't look like what the building looks like because it's like, oh, this part's gone. And,
right.
Yeah.
It's like Homer's car.
Exactly. It's definitely Homer's car. Yes. It's.
But what is that? The Crawford Center.
Crawford Family Forum.
There you go.
The Moan Broadcast Center.
Well, but the Crawford I think is perfect.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I think that it's. I know we've both hosted events there, and it's a great space.
What were some that you hosted there?
I got to do some events about comic books. Talk with comic book creators there, which I really loved. I think that I was preparing about a year ago that we ended up getting pulled because of changing priorities and stuff. But over the pandemic, I did this series called LAS TV Pilot Club, where we looked at old TV pilots and talked about like what holds up from them, what doesn't, what was super problematic, and we were about to do the post-pandemic in-person version of that, and we're in the middle of planning it. But I got pulled from that to focus more on getting more of our radio stuff up on our websites, and it was such a bummer because I was really excited. We were working on doing a live in-person thing, looking at the pilot of Cheers, and we had. We were working on trying to get George Wendt to come out.
Norm?
Norm.
What?
Norm. Yeah, it was a cool project that I wish we could have done. During the pandemic, we did episodes on Friends. We did The Office. We did Living Single.
So all these were the pilots
That's right.
that launched these amazing series.
Yes.
Did you learn anything about these pilots?
I think very much. A couple years ago, I wrote sort of the inspiration for it was I wrote a book a couple years ago about the TV show 30 Rock, and it was fascinating looking at a show that's like not that old, like 10, 15 years old, and like they did blackface on that show multiple times, and so did so many other NBC sitcoms from that time. And like during the pandemic, they had like pull episodes off of streaming because they were like, "Oh yeah, right, we shouldn't do this." Like
who was in 30 Rock in blackface?
Well, they did a thing where the first time they did it, they had Tracy Morgan and Jenna were arguing who has it worse, black men or white women. So they switch places with each other. Tracy Morgan dresses up as a white woman, and she goes in full blackface, including voice, and it's wow. This is so cringe. And then they did it again. In this, I talked with, when I was doing the book, I talked with their props guy who was a black guy, and he was talking about how the first time, he was okay with it because he was they're making a social point, fine. Yeah. The second time, and they did it again, it was for a really dumb joke where it was just showing that Jenna's still sort of racist. She goes as, for their Halloween costume, her and her boyfriend go as Black Swan. And the boyfriend is the, Black Swan character from the movie. And she dresses up as a football player. Lynn Swan is his name.
Yeah.
And in full blackface. Oh. And the guy I talked with from the show said, how he couldn't believe that they were doing this. Because, there was no social commentary other than they're bad people. And, he was but there's, no black people in power there. It was, all white power structures. And so, he was saying, how he had to, go cry in his office because he couldn't deal with this. And, and yeah, it was, I think that working on that book really sort of helped me, start putting together, what do we do with stuff that is amazing, super amazing writing, one of the classics of TV, but also super problematic, and how do you sort of hold both those things together?
Mm-hmm. Do you have a conclusion yourself, Mr. Mike Rowe?
I think that I've sort of come to the point where it's separating the art from the person. I look at the people, and I actually just did a panel about this at Comic-Con this year, where I talked with a diverse panel about what we do with this stuff. And sort of the place that I most agreed with was I had a trans member of the panel who was talking about how she felt that when people show that they're trying to change, when people show that they are learning, they're trying to do something different, that is a thing that you can keep following and embracing. It's when people refuse to do that is when maybe, put them aside and stop trying to follow their art. Mm-hmm. She felt I didn't, it's a thing that I didn't clock as somebody not from this group, but she was talking about how on the Tina Fey show, Mr. Mayor, that came out a year or two ago, it was there were the first few episodes of that had anti-trans jokes, and really? It was, she was saying
Tina Fey?
It was a bummer. Yeah, it was a bummer, and it's such a hard thing to figure out. When you're basically everything before now is problematic because and we've always screwed this stuff up.
Yeah.
But when you have people that don't learn and change with that, it's tough.
Well, I'm a bunch older than you, and I grew up the only black person in my neighborhood, mm-hmm. and loving comedy, obviously, and I feel like anything went in comedy back then.
Yeah.
And that was kind of okay, but I feel like it's almost like we're both religious people. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like once you bite into that forbidden fruit and your eyes are opened and you're no longer innocent. Now that we know better, we should be better.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I think that a lot of people had this awakening moment over the pandemic with George Floyd and everything, and they were being oh right, we're all terrible. And then now it's been a couple of years, and I feel like people are going back to there's a pullback right now.
Yeah.
I know in Hollywood, all the big diversity people at all the studios have been laid off.
Yeah.
Or
they've quit.
Or quit. Yeah.
Because they feel like it's a worthless gig.
Yeah, exactly. And it's diversity plans where it's do we need a diversity plan anymore? It's we did it. Diversity is all done. Yeah,
the people aren't marching in the streets. Go back to normal, everybody.
Yeah, so it's economics too. They're well, economic times are harder. Let's not do this.
Yeah, and
it's so frustrating to see.
One of the things that I had a great teacher in college, and one reason I think she's great was she. While she was criticizing me, she praised me. And she was you've got a couple gay jokes in here, and you don't need them. You're a good enough writer that these are kind of easy grade mm-hmm. school type gay jokes, and you're in college now. You've learned. You've read Tolstoy now. Would you kind of like show your maturity a little bit in even your jokes. And I would say that Hollywood should also be challenged that way. Have you seen Barbie?
Yes. Loved Barbie.
I thought Barbie did a fantastic job of this.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was very fun. Like, and even more like, everyone knew it was gonna be a feminist thing, but like, even like the way they portray Ken, like they give like they're like, oh, this is like our gender system is something we're all trapped under, and we're all like Ken's got issues too.
Ken's got issues, and also, maybe it's innate in men to be the way that it's portrayed in Barbie.
Yeah.
Because as soon as Ken saw it on Venice Beach, he was like, "This is it."
He was like, "Yeah, patriarchy.
I'm
Sweet.
home. This is amazing."
Yeah,
and quickly transformed. Because it's in our nature.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think that it is something that's in all of us to. I think it's so hard for people to put themselves in the shoes of others.
Yes,
and it's a thing where. The reason why like loving your neighbor is such a radical message is we don't naturally do it. Like,
and it's hard.
It's hard. It's real hard. It's like putting people before yourself. It's crazy hard. It's something that's that's sort of a lesson that they have to learn. And like characters always have to learn.
Yeah.
Throughout history, it's like why there's like screenwriting structure. Like another thing that I do is my wife and I write together. We write a lot of TV pilots and stuff.
So cute, Mike.
I know, right?
Come on now.
We've gotten some nice acclaim for it and stuff, and we're trying to break our way into selling some of that. But it's sort of all stories go back to like the hero's journey, and you see like people like initially have to like reject going on a heroic journey because they're like, that looks hard.
Yeah.
And then they get pulled into it, and it's
Barbie didn't want to go.
Yeah, exactly.
When the two shoes,
she gets the choice, and she's like, that one, no, I want to
easy one.
It all.
Right.
Yeah. It's like it's always a hard choice.
And by the way, let's not let Barbie off the hook.
Yeah.
Because she loved bossing the Kens around. She loved being the queen
She was happy being oblivious.
And totally happy every night only having girls' night. So, again, maybe it's not necessarily all men are bad because the right is saying that that's what this movie is, which is not true.
Yeah, very oversimplified. Like
it's that humans love to boss other people around and love to feel special and often ignore the feelings of others.
Yes, like figuring out how to incorporate other people's needs is so hard. I mean, I think that's one thing reason why I love writing with my wife is that it's a thing where like oh, I write female characters much better now because I have like a woman here helping me to figure this out.
There you go.
And it's a thing where like I'm like I look at some old stuff I wrote and I'm like, oh, that's no. Or like, it's funny, like we were talking about KPCC. My first big like online writing gig was I was volunteering writing for a website about pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like even I was like my only thing on my like other thing on my resume besides my internships really. And I remember in my interview at KPCC, they like pulled up the wrestling website during it. I'm like, oh, they're not going to hire me if they see this wrestling website. Yeah. But like I've gone back since and looked at the site and I'm like, I made some jokes in some of these articles that were like thumbs down. I'm like, I am so happy to have learned since then. But yeah.
Let's talk about religion.
Yes, let's do it.
We are both Christian. Do you go to church in LA?
I have been doing some like, especially during the pandemic, doing like distance watching video online and that sort of thing.
I do too.
Yeah.
Which church do you tune into?
I just recently got into this church in Glendale called Central Avenue. They're very progressive, very and yeah, I like them a lot. But there's a couple different places. I remember when I first came to LA, I went to this place downtown called Tribe, and it was very, very like hippie dippy, like we had like drum circles. We were very. It was like part of like a very LA type of Christians in like the like liberal Christian way. And it was, some of my oldest friends were there. It was like some of the first people I met in LA were at that church. I first moved down here and I was like, I lived in some not great places when I first came down here. I was living in like this like crappy bedroom in Mount Washington when I first moved here. And but like I heard about this church on the internet, and I sort of quietly went in, and it was such a great place for me to sort of develop and figure out who I am in Los Angeles.
Right on.
Yeah.
What was there a moment that you just got it about Christianity or the Bible or God or anything like that?
There was. I grew up in a very hardcore atheist family. Like my dad was super. He's like man of science, physics. He was a computer engineer.
What background are your parents?
My dad grew up in a family that was. His mom had been Jewish but converted to Christianity. His dad was also Christian, but they were like college professors, and I think he grew up with a little bit of that in the family, but he never really believed it. And then he was very atheist as he grew up. And then my mom was sort of nominally Christian. Like I went to church a little bit with her when I was little, but not. Then my parents split up, and that was sort of the end of that.
So your mom took you just once in a while to church.
Yeah.
Same. What about your grandparents? Did they make you go to church?
My grandmother on my mom's side was very Catholic. I remember when I was very little, she did say prayers with me as I went to bed. I remember just being terrified, like, wait, you might die before you wake? Like, that's a upsetting thing to tell a kid. Yeah, but yeah.
Did she teach you the Lord's Prayer?
No, did not know the Lord's Prayer.
So it was just kiddie prayers.
Yeah, very much. And so like growing up, I think by the time I started really thinking about these ideas, I got very much like Christians are idiots.
Yeah.
Like what a bunch of morons. This is clearly not true. It was in high school and senior year of high school. I over my high school time, like I accomplished all these goals I thought would make me happy. I was doing all these things where I became like president of my high school radio station.
Hey.
Figured out I got into drama, I got into jazz choir, I got into all this stuff, and then I was like, this doesn't make me happy. Like, what am I missing? And I think I sort of started being more open to the idea that there's what will make me feel more complete. And as often happens, there was a girl.
Thank God for girls.
Who talked me into coming to a youth group thing with her. And
you want to give her a shout out?
Yeah, sure.
You don't remember her name?
It's been so long.
You're
man.
the perfect married man.
Right?
You've just erased all the women of your past. That's fine.
I know. It's
good for you.
It's bumming me out.
No. Brownie points.
But yeah, it was this. So I went to go to this youth group thing, and then I was but I remember I had this moment where this song, I was. The two moments I remember the most are I was in the shower, and I just remember having this overwhelming sense of dread come over me, and I was just like, what do I do?
In high school?
Yeah, in high school. And then I remember hearing this song, and it's so cheesy, but it was this song, the New Radicals were one-hit wonders who did the song "You Get What You Give."
Yes.
And they had this bit in it about that I was sort of very optimistic message, and it grabbed me and made me sort of gave me this feeling inside, and it's sort of, I feel like it's part of the moment that I started opening up and sort of thinking there might be something else out there.
Really?
Yeah. I was like,
see, this is okay for people who may not have already turned off.
Yeah.
This is why I like to talk about religion with people, because it hits us in weird ways.
Yeah.
That you never see coming, that rarely do you see a depiction of it on TV or in the movies, because it does seem cheesy.
Yes.
The New York Radicals.
Yeah, right?
Whatever. I mean, it's kind of comedy. And again, in Barbie, the songs that matter to them seem cheesy in retrospect.
Yeah.
But that's also human nature.
Yeah.
That we are triggered by things that kind of fly under the radar. Otherwise, we would have blocked them.
Exactly.
Right?
I've always been a music nerd, and I feel like music was the way that ended up like communicating with me, and I ended up getting into like Christianity then, and then I think it was like a very like the like evangelical stereotype Christianity, and then I had to sort of work through that and be like, oh, why doesn't this click with me? And I'm like, I had to start figuring out like, oh, here's the kind of believer that I am. And it was like a weird journey, like figuring out like, oh, maybe I am more accepting of gay people than some of these other folks. And it was it was an interesting time. I remember like and I think that is something that's, when I came to LA, I tried a bunch of different churches here, and I think that finding a place that was right for me it's always tough. Like when you're, especially as someone who didn't grow up in it, it's like it's not my default to go to church. So, I've been to church all over town, gone to like conservative ones, liberal ones, and LA has a little of something for everyone.
Sure does.
Yeah.
There was National Geographic had a special about, I think either God or, just about God, just about religion. And it said that LA practices more religions than any other city in the world. And I get it. I mean, we're next door to the Scientology building.
Yeah, I was like, I parked to come do this podcast. I'm like, it's the Scientology building right here. Like that's, I never knew Tony lived right here.
Which you would never have probably in a lot of these other cities or countries.
Yeah,
and LA, I think, is just very open to. I mean, you don't hear about temples getting bombed in LA, and.
Well, when I first moved to LA, it's funny. I was staying at a hostel when I first came to town, and I remember like one of my roommates I had at this hostel was saying how he was like had just moved to LA and was trying to become an actor, and he's like, I'm thinking about joining Scientology. Just I think maybe that's the way to get going in my career. And I always think about like I remember coming here and being like, there's such the LA stereotype of like there really are people that want to become Scientologists. And,
I mean, I've lived here for 22 years. Their parking lots are always full. Their buses are always full.
Yeah.
I don't think they have an issue. And yet, because I want to be a good neighbor, anytime I talk to Odo, the security guy, I'm like, maybe you guys ought to have a bikini car wash out front because you're right on Sunset. People need their car washes.
True.
And so now I've expanded it to maybe there should be like an EV car charging station at your parking lot. People need their cars charged, and for 15 minutes, they could take the personality test, whatever it is that you guys do over there.
Yeah, lure them in. It's I have a friend who, another journalism pal who hosts a podcast about cults, and they did in other sort of weird religion-y type of things, and they did an episode where they went a series of episodes where they went undercover in Scientology. Took the classes. They sort of like, started working their way in until they got found out and got kicked out of the church.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. But it's a fascinating shout out to Ono, Ross, and Carrie for anyone who wants to check that out.
What's Carrie's last name?
Carrie Poppy.
My last guest mentioned her.
Yeah, she's great. Carrie's a delight.
How about that? All right.
Yeah,
We got to get Carrie on the show.
You should. Yeah, Carrie's awesome. Yeah.
Because cult is such a fascinating word. Because you told me earlier that you were considering being a pastor when you were in college. Same. And I don't know about you, but the reason I didn't do it was the reason I wanted to do it was just like what you said about televangelists or evangelism. I love televangelism. And I was like, I love TV. I love God. This is the perfect thing. But I didn't see myself on TV. So, or anybody in Gen X. They all seem like older dudes. Even Benny Hinn, who is a little more punk rock than the others, just didn't. I was like, I don't think any of my friends are going to be into this. So I've got to do it. But then I realized, well, what if I'm wrong about stuff? I want to be a good shepherd, but what if I'm a bad shepherd? What if I'm leading the sheep into a bad space? And I just couldn't deal with that. And so that's why I didn't.
Interesting. It's funny.
Why didn't you pursue?
I always wanted to be a communicator. I think that's what led me into working in journalism. And I always have been obsessed with the truth and what I think is the truth. And figuring out what that is. I think that what the sort of main thing that led me away from getting into being a pastor was like that was the plan right after college. Is I was applying to seminary. I
Same.
I got in.
Which one did you? Oh, you got in.
I got into one, and then there was another one that the one I really wanted to go to. My pastor from college sent her recommendation in late. And so, because of that, they said they couldn't consider me for that fall.
No. What school was that?
It was Princeton Seminary.
In New Jersey?
Yeah.
And Mike Rowe could have been Pastor
could
Rowe.
Could have. Yeah. It was what I was looking at. And then, like, so I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to defer and see if I can get in if I wait. And then after I waited, I didn't get in there. Yeah. So after that, I was like, well, I guess this is God telling me don't go do this. Because it was like, I was like, I got into a seminary in Minnesota also that I looked at, but I remember they really did not sell me when I went to visit. Because, like, I went to college, I transferred to college in Minnesota. I was there for 2 years. I heard the 2 years I was there were mild winters. And I was like, these are mild winters. Like, I'm good. So, it was, I remember that time, I really didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And it took coming down to LA to start figuring stuff out. And, I like so many young LA folks living in a bunch of weird places. I remember when I moved to the Echo Park, Elysian Park area, I had this roommate who, I was like subletting, and it was like a weird situation, and I don't know what his deal was, but he, like, I remember like one night, like in the middle of the night, he like knocked on my door, started telling me like, he's like, yeah, I got to go meet somebody. And somebody broke into my car and stole my wallet, but I'm going to go pick it up from this guy at this park. And I was like, okay, man. Like, so I ended up driving him to like a weird park, and he says like, I don't need a ride back though. So it was just like weird stuff like this would happen with this dude all the time. And
what do you think he was up to?
I don't totally know. I know that eventually he got us evicted from that place. I remember we got our hot water shut off even.
He wasn't paying the bills?
I don't know. I mean, he was like taking checks from me every month.
Yeah.
And then,
where in Echo Park was this?
It was really close to Dodger Stadium.
Oh.
I remember having to drive from our downtown LA offices home every night, and on like Dodger game nights, it was like sitting there forever as I tried to get like off to my little side street away from the games. But yeah, it was such a weird thing where, and then like he got us evicted, and then like he ran off with my deposits.
No,
like I remember that was like one of my first like big lessons in LA was like sort of like set me up not to trust people.
Right.
And I think that. Like that, and like also, I remember 2 times, when I was first at that hostel when I moved here, it was in Pico Union, and I remember 2 times I had food literally stolen out of my hands on my way home.
Out of your hand?
Yeah. I remember one time, like I was like carrying like a pizza home from like a local delivery place, and then like some like 3 dudes came up and like stole it from me. And I remember I'm like, this is what LA's like? I was like, I'm sure I just look like a mark as like a new guy here. And
you were pizza mugged.
I know, I was pizza mugged. And then like another time I, also involving pizza, I had these 2 teens tell me like, hey, give me a piece of that pizza. And I was a nice kid. So I gave one of them a piece of pizza, and they said like, yeah, give me some more pizza for my brother here. Oh, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to give you guys any more pizza. Then they started like following me all the way back to my hostel and started like swearing at me. And one of them like broke a bottle and like started threatening me. And like, I just like, was like, it was just, I was like, oh, this is not what I signed up for.
Delivery only.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was too poor to afford delivery. I couldn't get delivery back then. I couldn't afford a tip. I had nothing. Like, especially when I first moved to LA, like I had a few $100 in the bank, and I didn't have the job yet because I came down to interview at KPCC, and like I told them I could be down for the in-person interview in a week, and I did that.
Yeah.
And then it was like another month and a half before I got a job.
And then probably another couple weeks before you got paid.
Yeah, exactly. I remember it was like right around. I got my job at KPCC the week of Thanksgiving, And I was like, okay, I'm gonna be okay. But it was it's hard when you first come to a new city and you're figuring stuff out. You don't have like anything, so
and you don't know what the bad parts of town are.
Yep.
You don't know anything.
Yeah.
Which to me was kind of a blessing. It was fun to learn about LA as an adult because I moved here when I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
I was it was the summer, so I probably had about a couple months before I turned 18. But I don't know about you, but as I drove, the street signs and the towns, I was like, I've heard of Canoga Park.
Yeah.
I've heard of this. Did that happen to you too?
I think so. I think it started figuring out like, oh, this is what people talk about when on TV and stuff, and starting to, but yeah, like the only time I'd ever been to California was like go to like Disneyland, and
right.
it was like such a weird time to learn about. Like, so I lived at Echo Park Place, we got evicted. I remember I moved to Silver Lake into an even cruddier place.
No!
Where like
this was 2008 maybe?
Yeah, it was like like around 2008, 2009.
Which is I keep cutting you off.
Yeah,
because when people talk about Silver Lake being gentrified and how Silver Lake used to be bad, how Echo Park used to be bad, you experienced all this.
I mean, I think this was like as it's gentrifying. Like I kept moving into places like as they were gentrifying, but like not quite there yet. I remember
you were
like,
the tip of the spear.
Exactly. I was like, I remember that the place had like cockroaches.
Ugh.
It was my first experience dealing with cockroaches. And there was like, I remember one night like a skunk sprayed literally under my room.
Silver Lake skunk.
Yeah, exactly. So like everything I owned smelled like skunk.
No.
It was such a nightmare.
You were baptized in a different way.
Exactly. I was baptized in the odor of the Lord. And then like our landlord was a nut, like very LA. I remember when he first heard I worked in media, he gave me about 50 copies of a DVD of his short film that he was starred in.
Yeah.
He is like an Italian dude. He spoke very little English, and I was like, I have no power. I cannot do anything with these for you. I'm not going to be able to get you your Hollywood break.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, take. And I'm like, okay, I'll take your DVD. And then also he kept like this giant pigeon coop in the backyard for pigeons. And it was just like, they were just like be bird crap everywhere.
Yeah.
It was disgusting. And then I remember, I moved, finally got a better place away from there. I moved away. And then I remember listening to a podcast and hearing them on the podcast talk about there were these signs all over Silver Lake that were talking about somebody saying that the city was killing his birds. And I was like, oh crap. And they said the name of the guy. I'm like, that's him. That's my landlord.
Oh my God.
It was very much like, I'm like, oh man, I moved out of a nightmare.
What did you like about your time in Echo Park?
I really, really loved being in. I like the vibe of like it being, young-ish people. Mm-hmm. I liked being able to, get anywhere in town pretty easily because it's sort of pretty central to all the stuff I wanted to go to. I've never been a West Side guy. I was always like, I got involved in UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade comedy.
Oh, on Franklin?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Doing a bunch of like improv and sketch and stuff. And that was like my big obsession for a few years. And that's in Los Feliz. So it's like, that's like right in that area. And yeah, like that was where I always had to be. So,
did you run into people who ended up being big stars?
I did. I know that I have a lot of friends who went on to much more success than I have. But, they went, I think that most of them on the writing side, it's not necessarily people that they know. But I remember like one of my favorite ones was in a sketch comedy class I took with there was a girl who I felt like I recognized her. I realized it's because she has 2 million followers on Twitter.
Oh,
because she was one of the people who literally when you sign up for Twitter, they used to recommend accounts that you follow. She was one of them. Because
who's this?
Allison Auguste. She
her.
was she went on to write for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, a bunch of different shows. But I was just in sketch comedy class with her, and it was
she good in the class?
She was good. She was good. I remember I was in the writing group with her for a while after that. She was great, and it's I know a lot of people want to do big TV things, and it's very interesting sort of seeing the way that people come up through that system. And it was Amy Poehler has this quote where she says that just if you want to break into Hollywood, just go do comedy, do it for 10 years, and then your friends will give you jobs. Is her philosophy, circles back to what we're saying about who you know and stuff. And so many folks I know got opportunities and did that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to avoid doing Hollywood and TV and all that stuff, but it's kind of hard.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And I want to avoid it because I don't want people to have the impression that everybody in LA is working in Hollywood. But there's a lot of dotted lines to Hollywood. And if you live on this side of the mountain and there's microphones in front of you or you're writing, you're gonna be somewhat affiliated with those people.
I mean, I think one of the things that brings people to LA is even if they aren't working in Hollywood, they have a creative spirit to them. I think that's what the city's about.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing we're seeing from the SAG and WGA strikes is it's not a lot of those people who get work doing these things, that's not the only thing they do. I remember one of my first buddies who I met at this little indie pro wrestling show when I moved to town, his day job is he worked for the government, and so he would travel all over the country to disaster areas. And how about after Katrina, after all those things, he would be going and inspecting homes and that sort of thing. Good to get brought in to do that. But he also was a background actor and would appear in episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer or random things like that. So, but he never made enough money from that to be his gig. And then so many people, and so many people we know at KPCC were also actors, also musicians, also creative folks, because it's it's a very, very tiny percentage of people actually make a living doing the Hollywood thing.
That's right. Let's double back about KPCC real quick. So it sounds like you were there for 15 years.
Yes,
if I'm doing my math
15
right.
years. Yeah.
Tell me some of your highlights.
I think
what were some of your favorite moments there?
Some of my favorite moments there. I got to start one of our very first blogs doing a blog called Without a Net. It was my idea. It was let's do a group blog with all the people on the digital side writing about pop culture. And I was the only one who cared enough to write for it. So I wrote that blog. I got nominated for a LA Press Club Award for it, which
Congratulations.
was cool. I got last place in the category because, competing against people who were at much bigger publications.
Right.
But it was really exciting to get to do that. I love doing TV Pilot Club. I really loved I love hosting events. I loved getting to cover entertainment. It was an article I wrote for LAist. When we first acquired LAist, relaunched that site, there was a really tiny period of time where there was I feel there was some real possibility, and it was maybe the most successful time we had was when a lot of the people in digital were just doing really interesting projects. And one of the things I wrote was an oral history of the werewolf bar mitzvah scene from 30 Rock. And
I remember this.
Yes, and that's what led to me, and I won an LA Press Club Award for that
Congratulations.
story. And then
you beat those bastards.
Right? Then a publisher reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do a whole book about this.
What?
So that's how the book came about.
You didn't even pitch the thing?
No, I didn't pitch the thing. It was publishers said hey, I saw you wrote this article. Do you want to write a whole book about this? And it was weird because I got the call about the book literally the week my mom died.
Oh.
And so it was I was in such a weird headspace. So I was sort of figuring it out for a while. I was do I want to do this? But I was I'm a lot's going on right now.
Yeah.
But then I was my mom wouldn't want me to miss this opportunity.
Right.
So I said yes and signed the dotted line in December of 19.
Okay.
And then I always plans to go to New York and interview people, and then the pandemic happened.
Oh, the bastard pandemic.
Yeah, but it was an amazing opportunity to talk with a lot of very cool folks from the show, guest stars. I got to interview Pee Wee Herman recently passed, who was absolutely delightful, just as cool as you'd want him to be.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'm like so thankful to KPCC that I got to do those kind of things. And like all my friends are so excited. They're like, you work for KPCC? That's so cool.
Yeah.
It always has had its ups and downs. And like, there's times when it's more like, I'm like, oh, I want to do this creative thing. They're like, we need this other non-creative stuff. So I'm like, all right, I can do that.
But and we're not here to bash KPCC at all. God bless them.
Amen.
But.
Yes.
The almighty but. You win the Press Club Award, which I haven't met a media outlet that doesn't embrace getting a Press Club Award.
I remember there being a lot of upsetness by other folks because I won the Press Club Award. A lot of other folks in KPCC didn't win that year. And
they were mad at who?
It seems like a lot of times they started not applying for as many Press Club Awards after that. It was sort of,
come on, kids. You can't win them all.
Exactly, right?
Unless you're, who had like all of their Press Club Awards on their shelf?
It's a good. I think Sharon McNary did.
Right.
Think that, Paul Glickman.
Right.
There's. I think that we do such good work at KPCC, and like I miss being a part of them. It was sad seeing a lot of folks. I just got laid off from there. Is why I'm in the market. I'm just got a new gig that I'm probably going to be starting soon, covering entertainment.
Congratulations!
But thank you so much. But it's a weird thing because like I think that for a long time, public radio was cool because they had a business model that worked, because people gave them money because they cared about them, which is better than what newspapers had, because no one wanted to pay for a newspaper anymore.
That's right.
And now that's falling apart because, people who donate are getting older and older. Young people are not listening to the radio.
True.
And the pandemic made that happen way faster because people on their commutes are not going on commutes anymore. Everyone's working remotely.
Which is why it was smart for KPCC to get LAist.
Yes.
Because LAist had something like 700,000 Twitter followers. Yeah. KPCC only had 100,000. Even though they have this giant beacon, even though they have these lovely personalities like Larry Mantle and yourself, and yet for some reason, their blind spots seem to be younger people. And so to absorb LAist, who owned young people, like they totally got each other, was genius. What to me, and I can be a little critical, to me was they never really went down that path.
I mean, I think the problem is that, you could see it as a problem when they got acquired, is that like the media institution and the cool independent institution, like if the media institution embraces the spirit of the independent institution, that's one thing. If you make the independent institution become the media institution, then you're ending up creating something that's not as good as either of the things.
Right.
And
you can't put a suit on Bart Simpson.
Exactly.
I mean, he's gonna struggle with the tie. He's not gonna
still be saying "eat my shorts," and it's like there was no more "eat my shortsing." I think that it's tough, like right now, especially like the thing that people came to sites like LAist for was like I even knew LAist before I even lived in LA, because it was like in the early days, because it was like Gothamist, there was like one for all these cities, and like I was like, oh, LAist, I'll read about LA a little, and it was like just had a voice and like a thing to it, and I think that that's what was so cool about that like blog era. And then a lot of that's continued in podcasting. And now podcasting has like an advertising slide, and like everyone's figuring out how do you compete there. And like that's another thing with like I know that in LAS they bet big on podcasts, and then now those are having issues. They have to cut back there,
right?
Which
I think is okay.
Yeah,
because I don't think you should do things just because they're big.
Yes.
I think you should do things because you love it.
I mean, I think you have to commit to a thing, though. Like, whatever you do, like, commit to it and do it for a while. Yes. And then, like, I think that
So let me ask you this then. And I'm so sorry I keep cutting you off.
No, I totally appreciate it.
You're one of the sweetest people I've ever met in my whole life. And when you got laid off, everybody echoed that. Did you feel that love when you got
I did feel
All right,
that
good.
love.
So here's the question I have about podcasts at LA, since you were there.
Yeah.
One of the other people that got laid off was the guy that invented the podcast that was the #1 version there. So I'm a huge Springsteen fan.
Yeah.
And to your point about you've got to commit to something, Springsteen's first 3 albums, as great as they were, and still are great, some of my favorite albums ever, did not sell to the extent that Columbia Records wanted it to sell. And he was kind of screwed if his 4th album didn't take off. He was probably going to get fired. And thank God for all of us, that 4th album was Born to Run. And he worked his tail off on it, and it was a huge hit, and he was able to do it. Nowadays, bands don't get 4 albums to prove themselves. Likewise, it doesn't seem like podcasts get 4 years, 5 years, 6 years to grow an audience and to make it happen. And what intrigues me about the relationships of podcasts and KPCC is we can wring our hands about the fact that sometimes print organizations like the LA Times or the LA Weekly don't understand the web. Likewise, when radio outlets don't understand the web or podcasts, we can understand that. But they should kind of understand podcasts a little bit better because it's just a baby version of the radio show, right? Or maybe a more modern version of the radio show.
I think it is a more modern version of the radio show.
And so my question is, why would they kill their #1 podcast?
They're still doing the podcast. They just removed the guy who assembled it.
I didn't know that.
That podcast is still happening.
So they kept the product, but axed the dude?
Yeah, I mean, he was the one who produced it, but he wasn't the voice of it.
He wasn't the host.
So, it sort of shows how much goes into, the hosts are harder to remove than it is to remove the behind the scenes folks.
Right.
It's a tough thing. I think that there are so many I think what you're saying though about podcasts being little radio shows, there's such a difference though, because I feel like you need a bigger hook to get people into podcasts.
Yeah.
Because podcasts, you can have just a chat show on the radio. You can have a thing like that. But if you bring a new thing on when you're competing against everything else in iTunes, and Apple Music, you have to have a grabby thing. And especially figuring out something people want to come back for regularly is so tough.
Yeah.
There's so many big limited series things. People come in for a minute, we all love Serial. No one talks about Serial anymore. They got bought by the New York Times, but it's sort of got absorbed into that
Serial,
brand.
we just love the story.
Yes.
And that story ended. Mm-hmm. And so it's I feel like people were fooled by that.
I mean, it reminds me of in movies when they're from the executive producers of this other thing you love. It's I don't care that much about the executive producers. I care about that particular movie I saw.
Right.
So
Bob Schwartz, what?
Yeah.
I liked Adam Sandler.
Oh, that reminds me. My wife and I recently binged through the early Project Greenlight, and it's not on any streaming platforms. It's on illicit websites because
it's not on HBO. Wasn't that an HBO thing?
It was an HBO thing, but it was those early seasons are produced by Harvey Weinstein, and you see Harvey Weinstein show up in season 2.
No.
Because it's that version of Miramax. I'm this is never going to be seen anywhere ever again. But it's watching that show was an amazing education in what makes Hollywood work, what are how to be a manager too, seeing these young kids thrown into directing movies and them screwing it up is such a good way of seeing here's the lessons they're missing. And we just we binged 3 seasons of this over the weekend. And I'm I gotta figure out how to go out and be better and do this stuff. There's a more modern one that's up on Max still, but the first 3 seasons are erased and probably will always be erased because Harvey Weinstein's there. They use the it's these Boston guys using the R word to describe people.
Oh, yeah. It was a different time.
Yeah, it's Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are chain smoking throughout the whole thing. it's like this is like some honest Hollywood stuff here. So
And yet, I was never interested in watching it when it was out.
yeah, I was too poor. I could never have HBO. I finally have HBO because my wife works at Warner Brothers.
Oh.
So she works in marketing over there. So I think that's that's my connection with Hollywood. And it's like she's so far removed from anything. It's like she works 5 steps behind the scenes. So it's
but she still has a gig.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Thank God for that.
Yeah, I'm like when I got laid off, I was like, I'm still on my wife's health insurance.
Oh,
I
good.
could feel good about that. I felt so bad for other people that got laid off who didn't have those kind of resources, who are in like much more dire health circumstances, are older, or etc. Like that's a thing that I really want to do in journalism. Like why I've stayed in journalism this long is like having to like give voice to people like that. So
let me ask you one final thing about LASKPCC, because we could talk for hours and hours. And hours.
Yes, exactly.
Because fortunately we got to work with each other, and that was beautiful. Honestly beautiful, because you are just like me. You're down for whatever. You just want it to be interesting. You want to fill the gaps that aren't out there, and so it was beautiful to work with you. One of the things, though, that you did that I've never been able to do is you helped form a union over there.
It's true. It was we unionized in 2014, I believe it was. And I remember when it first started, I didn't know like that much about unions or anything, and then it was started coming together, and there were a lot of folks who were. I think at first though it was because of the tension between like radio and digital, and I think a lot of these radio folks weren't ready for digital at the time, and I think that was like the initial unionization urge came from more of the radio side, and
radio wanted the union.
I think so. I think that
because they were nervous that their jobs would be taken away.
Exactly. I think it was like they were nervous about like blogs coming in, about like them having to write for the website as well as the radio.
I think this is why KPCC approached me after I was laid off at the LA Times. Was they're like, we're going through the same thing over here, and you were able to kind of pull it off over there. I was like, well, did I? They still showed me the door. They're like, you pulled it off.
Yeah.
And I did have similar experiences at KPCC trying to get people to enter the modern world.
Yes.
And you used the word have to, which I think that they felt. Why do I have to also write for the web? Which I heard at the LA Times too. And I was like, you're a writer.
Yeah.
This is like being a horny guy at the club. I've got to kiss the blonde.
We want more writing from you.
You get to kiss the blonde. You get to kiss the redhead. You get to kiss all of them. You don't want to write for the web?
I mean, it bums me out. Like, I've always considered myself a writer. That's what I do first and foremost, whether that's writing screenplay stuff, writing journalism, whatever it is. I remember recently, there's a lot of AI stuff going on.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say, well, we could have AI, write the story so you could just go out and do the reporting and not have to actually write anything. I'm like, no, writing's the sexy part.
Yeah.
Writing's the part I want to do. I love crafting a sentence, and I don't want the AI to take my reporting and write it. I want to write.
Hold on. I think I missed something.
Yes.
At KPCC, because they did do an article 2 weeks after they laid off you people, saying we tried to do an AI podcast and it failed.
I remember I was in a meeting where somebody pitched that project, where the fake AI podcast and being able to do that.
It's still, you think, in their DNA that the ultimate goal, if there was a program that was sharp enough and human enough, that's what they would want to do?
I mean, I think a lot of companies, I think it's what they'd want to do. I think that...
But that's not the soft, fuzzy KPCC.
Now, I was on an AI task force before I left the company. I think that there's really cool things we can do with AI. I think that I don't want to replace humans with it.
Right.
I think that there is a push we've seen in Hollywood. We've seen, we just negotiated a new union contract at LASKPCC. And I know that with all the AI stuff coming up, people from the union tried to talk about that and get it into the contract, and the company wasn't ready to get any of that in the contract.
Right.
Because,
why would they?
Because they're like, this could be standard business in the future.
Right.
And, which is understandable from like a management corporate perspective.
Sure.
But obviously from the human perspective, which we're seeing with like WGA and SAG, it's like there's a lot of concerns about this AI stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that
here's where I think AI
Yeah.
could be good in journalism.
yes.
My research. Because what is research most of the time? It's going to videos, watching the videos, it's reading old articles, it's reading books,
Yeah.
reading magazines, all these things. If all of this is out there, let the robots get it, bring it back, and organize it.
One of the things I thought was the most exciting is like when I was talking to somebody on this AI group was about like we could use AI to create like a dossier on a subject area and then like give that to like your general assignment reporter. Like you're making them go out there and cover something, like let them get right in on it. I was talking to a reporter recently who was saying how she was live on the air and the host asked the question and they did not know the answer to this question because they were like a general assignment reporter and hadn't been on this subject area, so they had to like quickly go to like Slack and start asking as they're vamping on live radio to get somebody to tell them like what the hell is this question about. And if we could have people be more read in, that would be great. I think that having being able to do research, there's like AI now that can like listen to stuff and give you transcriptions, so like have it sit through all these city council meetings,
right?
And now that those are streaming, you can just like put the AI on it and get like the audio of this and then say like what are the important things in this that we should talk about.
One of the people that impressed me at KPCC was Pat Morrison, and because I had always seen her. I mean, she's impossible to miss.
Hats
right
everywhere.
At the LA Times, I always saw her, but I saw her every day at KPCC, and we were feet away from each other. She was super impressive, and that led me to start listening to Larry Mantle. And I remember there was a windstorm one day where, is it called Central Park in Pasadena, right by the station?
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
I think it's called Central Park. As weird as that is. Anyways, that turned out to be kind of the worst devastation of that. But while Larry was on the air, and it was an inspiration for me to do this, anybody that he talked to, he'd be like, Cerritos is calling in. How's the wind in Cerritos? And the lady would talk, and he'd say, oh, yeah, I love eating at Frank's Hot Dogs over there on Palm Avenue. And I'm like, Larry is able to do this with every single person. AI could feed a non-Larry.
Yeah.
Because Larry is older. And so, of course, he knows more about LA.
Yep.
But imagine you're a 22-year-old person filling in the middle of the night who's from Seattle by way of Minnesota. How great would it be if AI gave you little pointers of the conversation to guide you? You still have to talk. You still have to be a conversationalist. You still have to give a crap. And if you're smart, you don't talk about what AI tells you to talk about if you really don't know the next couple of questions.
Yep.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that,
help.
like when I first moved to LA, my godsend when I got here was this book, Not for Tourists, and it was broken up by neighborhood. It was like, here's what Echo Park is. Here's like a one-page summary of what Echo Park is. Here's what Silver Lake is. I don't know if they still make them or whatever, but like they had them. It was like a tour guide book for at least a few years around then, and they had them for different cities. And it was like, here's the vibe of this place. Like here's like the hipster area. It said like it recommended local radio stations.
Wow.
It was like I was like, this is what I like. I was like. When I went around LA, I was trying to figure out where to live. Like that was how I figured it out. Was looking at this. That's why I love everything like here in LA. Is it's about like all these different neighborhoods. Like LA is such a complicated place. From like
it is.
They talk LA County has like 88 cities.
Yeah.
We did a segment on that on KPCC.
Yeah.
And then LA itself is like a million different neighborhoods.
Right.
And it's like what's the difference between this thing like being able to be like no, the East Side is not East LA, and like it's figuring out how do you communicate all of that.
Did you work with A. Martinez?
I did. I love A. Martinez.
Me too.
My absolute favorite dude. We would geek out over comic book stuff because he's a comic nerd.
Yes.
He, seeing his success is one of the things I've been the most excited about. The best dude. I'm so excited he's hosting for NPR now.
Me too.
And there are people like that, like who, I always think about the people who supported me and what I did at KPCC over the years. People like you, people like A. Martinez, people like John Horn. I always loved working with.
Did you work on the
Frame?
Yes,
I worked
right.
on the Frame. I got to do. We were talking about digital and trying to make things more digital. They did a thing where they had me embedded for 6 months as like a digital producer for the Frame, helping them to like explain like how can we turn radio stuff into digital stuff. And it's something that's still being worked on all this time later. I remember like I always sort of joke around that like
John Horn, by the way, also shown the door.
Yeah. He decided to leave because the Frame got suspended when the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
And then he was doing some podcasts. And I remember I interviewed to be a producer on one of his podcasts. It was another podcast that they were working on. He spent like a year trying to prep this other podcast. And then the executive producer left, and they couldn't find a good co-host, so they cut the project. And it was,
couldn't find a co-host.
Yeah, they were trying to get like work with agencies, get like the right host for this, and
LA is filthy with talent.
Yeah, I mean, and like after they let John go, like a lot of people were saying like, why don't you cover entertainment?
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds great, but like, now there's
well,
no
also
one doing
okay.
it.
Let's rewind just a little bit. I worked for John at the LA Times.
Yeah.
When I was at the Academy, he would do a lot of the post interviews with the celebs. He has the perfect voice. He is a real journalist, so he knows the right questions to ask, and he's clearly obsessed with movies.
Yes.
I thought he would be the perfect fit at KPCC. That is the blueprint, right?
Yeah. It bums me out that like they couldn't find another show for him after the pandemic. I think that it's like with that advertising crash, like they didn't have the advertising they felt to bring the show back.
That was the thing.
I mean, that's my guess. That's when wasn't as involved with anymore.
Which
at the
is
time,
still hard for me to believe.
Yeah.
These movies have giant budgets, and okay, when I went from the LA Times to KPCC, all of my friends were so much happier for me than when I was even at LA Times, which was my dream job. They're like, I listen to KPCC every day. I don't read the newspaper every day. I was like, KP, who? I listen to Howard Stern. Were your friends the same way about when you or news strangers or wherever?
Yeah, I mean, it's like funny when I first came to LA, like the NPR station here is KCRW. Because
right.
I was a music nerd, so I knew like they have a nationwide profile when it comes to music.
Yes.
KPCC was like a thing. I'm like, what's KPCC? But Yes.
Like I've never seen so much love for a media outlet. Have you?
No, I haven't either. Like
right.
I think that KPCC, like people might get the call letters wrong. That's why they changed to LAist. But like I just literally got an email after I was laid off by a friend I've known since like 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
Who put KPPC in the email. And I was like, yeah, I see why they changed the call letters.
Yeah.
Like they tried getting a new name. Yeah.
But my point is that if I'm an advertiser and I live in LA, and if I know anything about LA, I would love to advertise at KPCC.
I mean, I think
because
it's
the smart people are there, especially if it's an A24 film. Where else am I going to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the aging demographic and the decline in radio audiences. Like, radio audiences are going down because people are turning to podcasts. People are turning to, YouTube, are turning to different formats.
But I'm talking about the John Horn podcast.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think that
it seems like it's a no-brainer.
It really would have been cool if they could figure out a way to make that work, because the studios do still spend a ton of money on award season stuff.
Yeah.
Although this year the Emmys just got delayed because
which is good.
Yeah, I mean, good for the union, but also that means that advertising is not going to be coming at the same time for radio stations.
Oh, is that what I should think about?
I mean, that's a thing that from the business side, I can see why they might have issues this year.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna you sort of see the trickle down of the strike. And the way LA, there's a lot of other stuff that happens in LA, but it is such a big the industry, the movie industry is such a big part of things that it does affect businesses like radio, like newspapers. Like those ads aren't going to be going out ahead of this September for award season for the Emmys.
Right. Mr. Mike Rowe, let's finish with this. How old are you, by the way?
I am 40.
Perfect. This is why I say perfect. I became the editor of LAist when I was 40. And it began all of my dreams coming true. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful run. When people worry about turning 40, I say, please look at my example. And because I feel like in your 20s and 30s, you're kind of figuring out what you're good at. You learn how to overcome obstacles, and I think it's easier after you're out of your 30s.
You know, I heard this Tori Amos quotes about turning 40. And she was talking about how, like, when you turn 40, like, you start becoming like the cool classic car. Like, you've been around. You start to I was talking about like how hard it is being in your 20s and 30s. And I remember I think LA has made me much more age conscious than I ever was living anywhere else. Especially a lot of my comedy friends, like I'm still connect with the comedy community, even though I don't do that anymore. Like, and I hear friends being like, "Oh, I just turned 30," or my friend is like, "Oh, I'm 35. I can never be anything," and I'm like, "Dude, like, you still can. I believe in you.
Yeah.
And plus, I'm older and still trying to do something with my life."
Right.
So, and I know so many people who are still trying to do cool creative things, and I think that it's a thing where you can't let that stand in your way. My wife and I, we still write scripts together. We're still trying to break into things, and it's we wrote a script recently inspired by I had an uncle who was in the Hawaiian Mafia.
Wow.
So I just we wrote a thing about that.
Are you Hawaiian?
I'm a quarter Hawaiian.
How?
My mom's from Hawaii. I'm a Hawaiian and Puerto Rican on my mom's side.
What a combo!
Yeah, right.
You're an island boy.
Yeah, exactly. I was born in California actually, but my mom was the only one of her. She's one of 5. She was the only one to come to the mainland. So I have 19 cousins over there.
Do you visit there often?
I haven't been for a long time, and especially since my mom passed. I've been meaning to get back though.
Yeah.
I haven't been since I was a kid because it was sort of weird estrangement and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I had this uncle who he was murdered before I was born because he was in the Hawaiian Mafia and was not a good dude. So over the pandemic, I sort of started researching him, and that was one of the scripts we wrote recently was about inspired by that.
Yeah.
I found this book, and my uncle's name is in the index, which I was like, oh, that's not good.
Why not?
He was a guy who he got killed because he sold heroin, I believe, to somebody, and then that guy overdosed, and his friend came and killed my uncle. And yeah, it was fascinating to read about. I hear weird stories from family too, about how people my mom stumbled upon these hidden guns and money in his place, and it was such a wild thing because I'm such a square. I'm
oh, come on, you comic books, wrestling,
true. Yeah,
public radio.
Yeah, exactly. But it was so learning about that was cool. But I think that I'm trying to figure out how we got on this, but
because I'm asking you this question.
Yes.
Your dreams.
Yes,
because this is why.
Yeah.
It was always my dream to do something a little bit punk rock because I too felt like a square. I still feel like a square. I mean, what and maybe we all do.
I was just thinking on the way over, I'm like Tony Pierce is the coolest guy I know.
Oh, God bless you.
Yeah,
God bless you. But whatever. I feel like I just got off the bus from Illinois, and I look up to people who truly are punk rock and don't care. I may come off as I don't care from time to time, but I care deeply. And so,
I think that's the thing that I've learned too is I had so little self-esteem, and I've had so little especially when I first came here. But I think over time, learning more and more that it doesn't matter what the hell other people think about me. What matters is that I keep trying to do cool, creative stuff.
Yes.
I think the thing is that I've known that I have creativity, that I can do cool things, but it's hard to be well, no one else believes that.
Right.
And I need to stop trying to imagine what other people think.
Yes.
I got into therapy during the pandemic, and my therapist is you got to stop trying to mind read. Like,
Right.
And I'm like, right, can't mind read. I'm like, as much as I read comics and think people can mind read, I can't mind read.
Well, but this helped me, and I hope this will help you too. My hero was Charles Bukowski, who got rejected famously for decades.
Yep.
And only until his 50s did a publisher finally discover him and say, you don't have to be a mailman anymore. Whatever they're paying you at the post office, I'll pay you to write stories and poems. And if I hadn't had a North Star like Bukowski, I would have looked at rock stars who not only succeeded in their 20s, but died in their 20s and thought that 35 was over the hill, 40 was over the hill.
I mean, I think the thing that I've also been learning more, I think that over the last few years is it's sort of all these people who have success, like, they have all the failures you can't see, plus so many of the people that are successful, like their parents, they're blue on Wikipedia. They have... They have like money. They come from a background. That was the thing watching. I just watched season 4 of Project Greenlight. There was this dude who was so privileged as the guy who won the contest, and like he had made a bunch of indie films and stuff, and never had a job, like because he never had to. Yeah. And I'm like, those of us who've had to do that, we've had to go through more. Or like some of my favorite actors, even like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, comes from like European royalty.
She
like,
does?
Yeah, she has her family is super rich.
Wow.
Like she did not ever have to work. Like I remember I've heard stories from people in comedy who said like when she did like Second City, like they'd go to be doing touring Second City stuff and get to a town and she's like, oh, this hotel's not good enough, and would go like get everybody a cool hotel room.
Oh, that's cool.
And like, it's like it's cool that she's using that, but like you can't compare yourself to these people who have all that come from like starting on third base.
But I you're right, but I feel like it's easier to beat those people.
Sure.
Because I am going to be up until 3 a.m, making sure that the blog post for this episode is fantastic.
Yes.
Whereas if I was in my Malibu beach house, either I'd be ordering some more cocaine or asleep. Because who cares if it's successful or not? Which, again, I care. I want everything to be a huge hit, which is why I'm so sorry that we worked together at the only place that I wasn't successful at.
I mean, it's like, I think that, it is still having that drive. And that's the thing, that Project Greenlight season 4 winner, he didn't direct any other movies after that.
Interesting.
Like, it's the thing where, you see, like, when, like, he was sort of, like, frustrated by the process and, like, didn't get everything he wanted. And, like, we're used to not getting everything we wanted. Like, it's like, we're going to keep doing it because, like, we'll do the stuff we like, and we're not ever going to get everything we want because, like, that's all we can do. Like, we're broken like that.
But I also think we've better stories to tell, too.
Yes.
We've better stories to tell, and we're willing to tell them. If I was a Nepo baby, I might not name drop my famous friends or my famous friends' parents. But if, like Drake says, if we start at the bottom, who cares who you talk about?
Right?
Because hopefully they're happy for us as we make our way out of the ghetto.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a thing where I know I can't give up. I'm going to keep going.
Okay, that's my final question for you. Not to disparage whatever job is going to pay you in the next couple of years. I imagine that's not your dream.
Yes.
Just like LAist was my dream, but I knew I'm not going to be doing a blog for the rest of my life. Turned out I kind of was. But I knew that wasn't the end of the rainbow. I also knew that Jen Chung, the editor of Gothamist, was such a superstar that I would never be able to be as great as she was. But I did have higher aspirations. What are your dreams, Mr. Mike Rowe? You write these scripts.
Yes.
Do you want to write scripts the rest of your life?
I think I do. I think that I'd love to have stuff sell for TV. I'd love to. My wife and I would love to be a writing team, writing for television.
Has there been a husband and wife writing team?
There have. The people who did the Good Wife, husband and wife writing team. I know that we've gone. My wife and I, we go to the Austin Film Festival every year because it's sort of like Comic-Con for screenwriters.
Okay.
And we've always gone to the panels with like the married screenwriting teams. There's like a handful of them that have done really well for themselves. And
I've heard of brothers.
Yes. Like Duffer Brothers and the Russos did the Avengers movies, and
who are the Matrix people?
That is the Wachowski sisters.
Now sisters.
Yes.
Are they twins?
I don't think they are. I think one of them's older.
But they've followed the same path.
Yes,
which is fascinating,
very
right?
much. Yeah, I have a friend who actually just wrote a book about the Matrix. Who wrote a book about the trans allegories of the Matrix, and who is trans and obviously connected with all of that.
So, do you think it's easier for siblings or a married couple to be writing partners?
It's a good question. I think that I would guess for siblings, but I grew up as an only child, so I have a half brother who's 20 years younger than I am. So
Right.
he's like 18 or 19 now. He just got out of high school. He's like figuring stuff out, but
Yeah.
like he's my Gen Z connection.
Good.
And yeah, I think that as a married team though, like we like spending time with each other.
Right.
We're it's like we know how each other think. I think that like being, it's coming from different places gives us more stories to tell.
Yeah.
I think that I love being able to incorporate different stuff about our gender backgrounds, about our racial backgrounds, about like all this stuff that we have these different experiences that makes better stories. And there's two of us writing them, so
Barbie,
Yeah.
it just dawned on me, created by
yeah.
husband and wife team.
Yeah, it's obviously Greta Gerwig directed, but she works with Noah Baumbach. Like they're partners in creative projects, and I think that that's the kind of thing we'd like to do. I think that we like it. The industry's changing so much right now. Who knows what TV rooms are going to be like in the future? It's so hard to get in one now. Like that's one of the things that the writers are striking about right now is that they want they're saying like there might not be writers' rooms anymore for shows.
Yeah.
So who knows what the future's going to look like? But I know that I want to tell stories and I want to make people's lives better. Like it's when I did the 30 Rock book, I wanted to talk about like my favorite stories in that book. We're talking with like that black prop master. We're talking with a woman who wrote in the first season of 30 Rock and had to quit because her husband wanted to have kids. And she's like the male writers could have kids and not have to think about this, but like because she's a woman, like there was that pressure on her to do that, and she knew this is the best show she was ever going to write for, and she had to leave.
Yeah.
And I think that I want to like elevate stories like that, whether I do that fictionally as through screenplays or whether I do that as a journalist. I think that's another thing I love doing too. So I think that I want to do the big creative stories. I want them to have impact on people. We talked about becoming a pastor. One of the reasons I didn't become a pastor, it wasn't just not getting into school. It was also realizing I didn't want to preach to people who believe the same things I believe. I want to go ahead and inspire people outside of like not preaching to the choir. I want to create like cool, inspiring, original things and lift up people who aren't like me. And becoming a traditional pastor is probably not the way to do that.
If you were to write a Bible movie
Uh-huh.
about a Bible story or character, who would it be?
I think that I would want to write about. I think I probably would go outside of the canon.
No.
And I had
The extended universe?
yeah, exactly. Extended universe of the Bible. Go for maybe Gospel of Thomas.
I don't know this.
It's so it is not part of the Bible, but it is.
Is this a Dead Sea Scrolls?
I'm not sure. I had a professor in college who loved the Gospel of Thomas, and it's basically like allegedly written by Jesus's brother.
Which one? He had 3, right?
Exactly. It's like by Thomas.
Okay.
So it's Gospel of Thomas, but like it has some like interesting stuff about gender. It has has a bunch of like stuff that doesn't totally fit, but like mostly fits with the rest of the Gospels. Like that's why it's not in the Bible. Is because like when they were deciding like what goes in the canon, what doesn't go in the canon, like there's the councils that decide these things.
Yeah.
Thomas didn't make it in, but it's a fascinating read. It's pretty short too. It's and I feel like that there could be some fun stories to do with that. I think that,
hold on.
Yeah.
I think you're onto something, bro.
So yeah, I mean,
I think because this is why.
Yeah.
I've read the regular Bible like 5 times.
Uh-huh.
And I'll have to do it again because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah,
hard. And I don't even mess with the non-canonical stuff because I don't know if it's true. I don't know. And the regular Bible's hard enough.
Yes, exactly.
But a Netflix series
Yeah.
that talked about that told us those stories and dramatized them. Maybe there's some jokes. Is there some funny in the?
I think so. I think there is. Like, and there's like, I think there's a bit, it's been a while since I've looked at it, but like where Jesus basically says like how like it basically says like this woman can become like the rest of us or something like that. But it's basically like a lot of people say like, oh, it's him putting down women, but the other way to look at it is it's saying like in the kingdom of heaven there is no gender. And so it's like such a, like I feel like right now that's such a powerful message for this moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, you know, I will say like my faith does influence the things I write. I think that the biggest thing we did was I have a lot of anxiety about death. And so I wrote my wife and I wrote a sci-fi story where it was about like main character dies and she wakes up again, and the afterlife is like an outer space battle. And it was like a fun sort of way of me dealing with my like anxieties about death and about like the idea that like the sun's going to eat our planet eventually and all of that. And I feel like that's the kind of story, like, you know, I think that the Gospel of Thomas could be a cool story. Like, you've inspired me by asking me that.
Good, I'm glad.
But I also think that like using those influences to like, you know, what are the things that we're all scared of, and like having creating stories that we can all relate to, whatever you believe, I think is the thing that I'm excited about. But like they say, like the specific is universal and vice versa. Like I have a lot of anxiety specifically about space stuff, but like I feel like the way to create a story that we all have some sort of fears about big existential things, and yeah, I think those are the kind of stories I want to tell. But
well, God bless you, sir.
God bless you.
We're all here to support you. Where can people follow you on social and all that?
Yes, follow me on Twitter. I'm still there. Oh, X. It's X now. Follow me at Mike Rowe, MikeRoe, no W. I just, people still mess it up. I also have had people tag me because they think I'm the Dirty Jobs TV host, Mike Rowe dude. I had the Tea Party tag me with a quote from that Mike Rowe. I'm like, no, it's not me, bro. But yeah, follow me on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. You know, who knows what social media is going to be. But yes, I'm out there. I do. You can find me at themikerowe.com because I cannot get mikerowe.com. And also my wife and I probably that's the easiest way, or mikeandchristiana.com because we have our writing team stuff up there. And also links to our socials. So yeah, the Mike Rowe or just at Mike Rowe on Twitter, and all the social things, except for I think like there's some I had to do Mike D Rowe because someone beat me there. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out TikTok. I'm trying to figure out all the things.
Yeah.
So
thank you for being here. And best of luck on these scripts. I'm sure they're going to be great.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
My pleasure. How great was Mike? You know who we'd watch pro wrestling with at one of those Summer Slams? Our Patreons. When you stoke us, you're saying, Tony, Jordan, every fall you should buy a new garbage can for your kitchen. Do you know how gross they can get after a year? Here's some money. Go to Home Depot. Knock yourself out. So shout out to our Patreons, Nancy Rommelman, Sean Atlow, Matt Mills, Sean Wallace, Greg and Molly, Jamie Taylor, Mark Johnson, Kira Ann, Barney Grinke, Ben Welsh, Jen Adams, Trevor Wilson, Bree Wild, Dougie Gyro, Christina Up North, Robin Carey, Adam Shorn, Ben from Down Under, Chris from the ATX, Gregor, and our newest Patreon, Phil Stark. To be a Patreon, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/hereinla and give till it hurts. Want to support us, but you just blew all your dough buying U2 tickets for that Sphere in Vegas? You can still help. Post your favorite episode on your Facebook. Oh my God, post 2. Tweet something nice about us. And anytime you see me tweet about an episode, retweet it for God's sake. And tell your friends. Tell them how Here in LA is spelled and that it's on Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify and Amazon. Here in LA is produced by myself, Tony Pierce, and a man who spent some time in the Crawford Family Forum, I bet, Jordan Katz. Editing, mixing, and music supervision by Jordan Katz. Songs by Orgone and Jordan Katz. Special thanks to Cindy for creating the logo, Jen for inspiring this, and lovely souls everywhere like Mr. Mike Rowe. Thank you for being so cool.